You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Picard called Surrender. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father.
How's it going? Wait, Surrender, isn't it a song from Cheap Trick?
I'm not going to sing that one either.
I've been in a song mood today. We both titles that we recorded today had song themes.
Yes, exactly. So as you'll notice, it's just Father Cory and I today. Jimmy's got something else that's going on that's taking him away from us, but he'll be back soon. But until then, I want to remind everyone to get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt or other kinds of merchandise by visiting sqpn.com/merch, M-E-R-C-H. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Stargate. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Stargate. And I want to say, you guys, Father Cory does that one too, and you guys have just hit 100 episodes that you've recorded, which is amazing. And it was a special one because you had Joseph Malazzi on it, who is a writer for Stargate SG-1.
He was a writer for SG-1, a writer and executive producer for the last half of SG-1 and Atlantis and SG
Universe.
Stargate Universe.
Right.
So he was very much involved in the later, like I said, the later Stargate. He wasn't the first 4 or 5 seasons, but the 5th season he came in and became very involved. And it was a great interview. We got to talk about a lot of different things and very gracious. And we were able to avoid being the, if you remember the old Chris Farley SNL skit. So do you remember when you were in the Beatles? That was awesome. You know?
You remember that time when Jack did that thing? That was awesome.
Yeah, we avoided that.
Although you did get apparently a little bit of discussion about what's going on with Stargate and its future, and a little bit of that too. So
yeah, he dropped a little bit about the pilot script that was written by Brad Wright. He kind of talked about things that none of us had heard out on other rumor mills. So we might have a little bit of a
exclusive
there. You'll have to check it out. It was a great interview. We had a lot of fun doing it. And he was very gracious, and it was a fun interview. It turned out very well.
So everyone should go check that out. sqpn.com/Stargate. I do want to encourage everyone to stick around. We have more of the fabulous feedback from our listeners on the recent episodes. I love getting all your theories. We're coming to a head. We've only got 2 episodes left, so we've got to get those theories in. So we'll have a little more of that. But in the meantime, let me read this recap of what happens, and hopefully this one goes better than it did in our recording of The Secrets of Doctor Who, because I relied on ChatGPT to summarize, and we all know how reliable ChatGPT is. But I'll have to ask Jack Berzini, because he uses it to do the summaries for Stargate. So I'll have to ask him what his trick is. He probably just reads through it.
I think he uses it as the first draft and then cuts it down.
I think I've got it. I think this is going to be okay. So here we go. Now in control of the Titan, Vadic begins to lock down control of the crew, sending her henchmen to hunt them down in the corridors, lining up the bridge crew on the bridge. Geordi and Alondra are worried about Data lore and disconnect him from the ship, get him off the Wi-Fi, while Picard, Beverly, Jack, and Sydney are in sickbay trying to figure out what to do next. That leaves Jack to confess his special abilities to his parents, and he tries to use his telepathic control to use a bridge officer to input Picard's special admiral code to lock down the ship, but he's caught. And Vadic gives Jack an ultimatum and a countdown as she menaces and ultimately executes one of the crew members on the bridge. Meanwhile, on the Shrike, Riker and Deanna are stuck in a cell as they reunite and talk about their grief over their son and begin their reconciliation. At which point, Worf arrives with perfect timing to rescue them. Along with Rafi, they get the data they need from the Shrike's computers and skedaddle to the Titan, which they are hoping Picard is now in control of and isn't. Realizing that their only hope to retake control is Data, you are our only hope. Picard has, other franchise, Picard has Geordi lower the partition in the android's brain to let Data and Lore fight for control, while Jack goes to the bridge to stall Vadic. Data ultimately wins that battle with Lore, saves the crew, and tosses Vadic and her henchman, her number one, out into space. The crew reunites. Deanna sits down with Jack to figure out what the darkness inside him is and what's behind the red door. The end. That one went much better.
I have to ask, ChatGPT actually used skedaddle?
No, I did edit this one.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I would be impressed if it had picked that particular word.
I don't know. Skedaddle is my word. So, first impressions of this episode, Surrender?
Oh, very, very good episode. I mean, there has not been a bad episode this season.
I agree.
This has been another good one. And of course, it hit all the right chords for back to TNG and and resolve the situation with Vadic. I think we can say pretty definitively, Vadic is done. It's over.
Surprising. That was pretty surprising. Yeah.
We will talk about that, but this is pretty definitive. There might not be a body, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
No, it was a very, very another well done episode, and the interaction between Data and Lore and how that all worked out and everything was again well done. So I really enjoyed this one. I really did.
Yeah, when you talk about how like there hasn't been a bad episode this season, I agree, and I think this says something about what is going on with the production of Star Trek, and maybe it should say something about the future of Star Trek, which is maybe Terry Matalas should be in charge of Star Trek and not Akiva Goldsman and Alex Kurtzman.
Yeah, and there's rumors about that. We can talk about that towards at the end, but yeah, there is a lot of rumors about that there might be some changes in Star Trek production going forward. Paramount is noticing. Yes,
and fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about the this episode then and get right into it. So Vadic starts off. We ended last episode by her, taking control of the ship and then saying, Jack, we're going to find out who you really are, which of course we don't.
Kinda.
We kind of find a little more, but we don't get the complete revelation. But she starts by, we have this kind of extended sequence of her locking the crew out of comms and sensors, and that we see the skeleton crew that's still on board starting to get slaughtered by these henchmen roaming the corridors. It's kind of it was kind of brutal I think.
Yeah. Brutal, kind of horror filmish. You don't know what's around the next corridor. I mean, it was almost poetic. That's perversely poetic the way she was. First, I'm going to take your eyes, and she turns off all the lights, and then I'm going to take your ears and turns off the comms, and then I'm going to take away the road ahead of you. And I mean, it was really, well acted.
Yes, well acted, well written. I've heard some complaints from some fans that Star Trek isn't family friendly anymore. At least Picard isn't. There's a lot more swearing. There's more brutal violence. What do you think? I mean, is that we're in an era of everything's on streaming, so anything goes. That's kind of the way a lot of it is these days. Do you think Star Trek in general has gone over the line from being the whole family can sit down and watch it to something else?
This definitely isn't TNG. This definitely, it very much. I would say this is more along the lines of the movies, the TNG movies. Because you remember there was more violence in those. There was right. That was the whole thing of as the Enterprise saucer is crashing into the planet, Data goes, oh bleep, yeah, that's right. He did. Stuff like that. And this part of this is the difference of this is a more mature show on a streaming platform, so they're not bound up by the FCC regulations and stuff like that, and they can get away with it more. I don't think this is totally inappropriate, although there were a couple of scenes in here with the gore. Literally a crew member pinned to a bulkhead, stuff like that. That was a little excessive. That didn't need to be there. Right. And then we've seen that in Discovery as well, especially with the Klingons there. And although I don't remember Strange New Worlds having that, although there was other stuff having to do with Spock and his fiance
that was a little more than what we would have seen in original track or of TNG or DS9 or anything like that. So, yeah. I wish it were more family friendly. I would love to watch it with my whole family, with all my kids. Yeah, that sort of thing.
But then that's why we have Prodigy.
Yeah. That's true.
That's what Prodigy's for. It really is.
Right. That's right.
I was going to say Prodigy and Lower Decks. Like, no,
not Lower Decks.
Not Lower Decks.
It's animated, but it's not for kids.
There's some really inappropriate stuff in there.
They really cross the line on Lower Decks, but yeah.
Magatos.
No kidding. And bird people. Anyway, so then we get to this revelation about Jack, and I'm glad that we didn't drag out the Jack dragging out this whole thing about not telling his parents about what his experience. I'm glad it is episode 8 of the season. We've only got 2 left, so it had to come out at some point. So I'm glad it's out in the open. We're talking about it, and this idea that he can float into other people's heads and control them. I've heard a lot of theories like that. What the Vadic's boss wants is the Borg implants, the Borg nanites, perhaps, that are in Picard and maybe have been passed on to Jack. I don't think that's it, because this isn't a Borg ability as far as I remember.
No, we don't. The only time we see, someone controlling other people would be like the Queen controlling her drones,
right?
Borg drones. Not that she could then, reach out to someone else. Like she couldn't even control data.
Yeah.
In First Contact. So that's definitely not it. Now that they're giving us a little more hints in this. We see Raffi and Rafaela. I love that Worf keeps calling her Rafaela instead of Raffi. That's
yeah.
But they find the body of Picard, and that there are parts of his brain missing that were infected by the syndrome.
Yeah.
They thought was the syndrome that he had, and that there might be something more to that. And so maybe that's what he passed on. There was something that's implanted in him that got passed on to Jack that's causing this.
Right. I wonder if it'll have anything to do with the flute thing where he lived a lifetime in a memory, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, Picard has had a few occasions where things have invaded his brain. That was one of them. So I wonder now.
That's a deep cut. I mean, that would be a very deep cut.
Although an important moment. I mean, that flute came up in one of the movies. I think Nemesis, or something.
Yeah. Well, the flute was in the first episode of this season, where it was one of the objects he was looking at as they were cleaning. Yes. Chekhov's flute. I think that would be, it was an important episode in Picard's development.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I think it would still be kind of a deep cut to say, well, this actually had something to do with that. Yeah.
Plus, there's nothing that was, again, had to do with that incident that implied mind control and telepathy and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was more he lived through the playback of this life.
Right.
And then, it affected him personally. It was more of a developmental affectation than something changed in his brain.
Yeah. It would be deeply ironic if the Irumodic syndrome was not, in fact, a fatal disease that Picard shed his old body and, from our point of view, killed himself
for
nothing. Yeah, that would be deeply sad and ironic, but interesting. So Vadic has control of the ship without having the control codes. I don't understand how the command codes for the ship work necessarily. There's this Admiralty command code, which apparently can take over any ship, as long as you have that. But then there's like the captain's command codes, which this captain apparently, or Seven apparently didn't get a chance to, erase or whatever, lock out. Yeah. So anyway, it's for the sake of the plot, we have to have her in control of the ship. And I'm not super opposed to that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely where they're just kind of saying, we forgot that Seven could have said, lock all codes, and that would have done it.
Yes, exactly.
But she gets called because she also doesn't blow up the turbo lift like she was supposed to.
Right.
And allowed him to get on the bridge instead.
Right. And which would have killed Shaw because he was in it. So we have this series of scenes with Riker and Troy on the strike, and it's in the cell. And I gotta say, I really like these scenes. Riker and Troy bantering, teasing themselves like a couple who've been together for decades. You know, there's the teasing back and forth.
Yeah.
And then they also get serious where he where they discuss the grief and the elements that push them apart. Their in their relationship, and he basically he says, Dana, you used your powers to push away my grief just when I needed to feel it. Like, she suppressed his grief with her empath powers, and then she responds, I feel everyone's grief, not just my own. And so, I it was her reaction to try to push those feelings down so she wouldn't have to feel them so much, and then admits that she forgot as a counselor that you can't skip to the end of healing. And I really like that little interplay there.
Yeah, that was something that, I'm glad that with Troy's character, they've developed her, not just in Picard, but even going back to TNG. Mm-hmm. Because you remember the first episode was painful to watch. I feel joy.
I sense sadness.
It's like, oh, and she's like crying this, it was terrible. But they've developed now these empathic abilities that Beta-Zeds have. So they're much more believable that if there's a race that has this ability, this is how they're going to react. And this idea of, if you have this couple that loses a son tragically, they're going to have that mutual grief, but she's going to feel it doubly because she's going to feel his as well as her own.
Right. Yeah. And the idea that, as parents who are grieving the loss of a child, and the stages of, like, there's the classic stages of grief, anger, denial. I didn't even look them up ahead of time. Anger.
Yeah. Acceptance is the last one.
Acceptance is the last one. Right. Bargaining is one of them, and so that idea that you have to, get to the end, you have to, go through all those stages. You have to live through grief. As someone who is recently suffered some personal losses, my parents, I recognize, like, for me, I mean, my parents were elderly and I was prepared somewhat for it. You're never fully prepared, of course. But yeah, just as I did, you have to feel those feelings of grief. You have to go through it. And I can't imagine if someone had suppressed it. And that would explain why Riker kind of felt so empty. As we talked about earlier in the season, empty, without having experienced those stages of grief. He has not accepted. And I lost, my mom a little over a year ago at a younger age. She was in her mid 60s when she, so, much younger age, not, kind of expected because she had an ongoing condition that led to it. And grief doesn't end on a schedule. It's not something you can say you've got a month and you're done. I still, when I think of her, still kind of tear up a little bit and, and grieve. And that's a part of life and grief. And what kind of pushed Riker away from her and what caused him to become so numb, or not, he used numb as far as, because for some people, and that was kind of like for me, your first reaction is numbness. You're just kind of like, your brain just goes into, I need to do what needs to be done. And then we worry about this later. And, but then when he was going to open himself up to the grief, she blocked him from it. So he really never got to grieve in the way he needed. Right. Yeah. I mean, you talk about grief, not having a timetable. I remember when years ago when we were first married, Melanie had a miscarriage, and just like months later, we were watching TV or something, and I just suddenly burst into tears. I'm like, I don't understand why I'm crying right now. I thought, and then I realized it was because something on the TV reminded me of a baby, and that brought it home. And it's like, wow, that's, you're right. I mean, there's that numbness. I think, especially guys, I think we have a tendency to kind of, without being too stereotypical, but to denial, numbness, however you want to phrase it. And then, everyone goes through a bit of denial, but then you have to, not even that's like you have to grieve. You're gonna grieve. Yeah. That's a natural part of it, and she suppressed it unnaturally. So, I like that they wrestled with this. It wasn't a quick, hey, we're together now. Let's everything is resolved. Let's move on. You could tell there was this this movement in their relationship that was, I think,
a healthy one. And and it's one thing I'm glad about. I know I had mentioned early that when they brought up this idea that Riker and Troy were separated, or at least were distanced, it would probably be a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. Don't make this into like a divorce situation. And they did.
Right.
And I'm grateful they did that. These are great characters. They're great together. And I think they resolved that in a way that's fantastic.
And I think Troy was great in this episode, whether it was with Riker or with Jack. I mean, I think she was, the writing of her in this episode was really well done. I was really, and the acting. I mean, Marina Sirtis has always been great. So I did like the line where he says, it was basically, I think, the first line, "I missed you, Imzadi," and she's like, "Oh, I should have taught you another word." And it says Yintaru. And he says, "Yintaru, what does that mean?" "Baby of immense size."
Yeah.
Like she's basically calling him a big baby.
Yeah, exactly.
I did like that. That was good. So, yeah, and you mentioned, by the way, the Shaw and Seven back on the Titan, and he was mad at her for not sacrificing him to save the ship. And there's this dispute, and she says, I mean, he basically thinks, you should have sacrificed me because now we're doomed. And from Seven's point of view, I didn't sacrifice you because there's always another way. She just believed that we will succeed. We will survive. We will win. And I thought it was interesting, that interplay, and how Shaw really comes across as a guy who's not looking to be a hero. He doesn't expect the grand victory. He's just a regular guy. Yep. And Seven is in this other tier of Starfleet where, Voyager, DS9, TNG, the original Enterprise, they always win in these grand battles. And so it's kind of it's funny that this disconnection between them.
Well, the Titan is kind of the second class of ships, with the California class, but even below them,
Yes. So then we had that scene. We talked about the execution of the bridge officer, the Lieutenant Tavine, the Vulcan officer, the evil and brutality of it. Because you had this one officer, the tactical officer, I don't remember his name, that Jack took control of, that Vadic caught. And then this other, I think maybe Romulan? I couldn't tell what she was. She was another alien.
Romulan, the one that was the other bald-headed.
Yeah. Couldn't tell what she was. But in any case, I think Ensign Esmar, I think she is. And then she is, Halligan. That's what, according to Memory Alpha. In any case, she was like kind of crying. And so Vadic kind of singles her out and makes her kneel down and is like, she's going to shoot her in the head while she's trying to get Jack to, give himself up. And then just at the last second turns and kills Tavine, that it's just that brutality, just to show how brutal she is.
Yeah. The one lieutenant that she takes over was Lieutenant Matthew Murrah, who is half Bajoran, half human.
Okay. Yes. Who is a father. Like she says, is there anyone who loves you? I mean, just to bring that out, this idea, he's not just a disposable red shirt, Right. He's a person with people who love him. Again, I think it's a really interesting writing choice, is to, these are not just background characters, although, some of the people in the corridors end up, being killed sort of like that. But this idea that these aren't just background characters to be disposed of, they're real people within the bounds of the show who have people who love him, and they have people who are looking forward to them returning home and that sort of thing. And I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Well, and it's interesting too, kind of a shift, because, one complaint that I know you and I have talked about for Discovery is that the bridge crew is they're there. You see them all the time, but who are they?
Yeah.
Try to think of the bridge crew of Discovery. I can think of Detmer and Timoan, or however you pronounce her name.
Owo.
Owo. Yeah, Owo.
Detmer, Owo, and I can picture the other ones. I have no idea who they are. Yeah.
There's the one that's the half android, and stuff like that. And it's just, they were forgettable characters, but they were central characters. There were so many of them.
Yeah.
But then you take this crew, where the bridge crew isn't a central character. They're important characters, but they're not central characters. But we're learning more about them, and we're learning their names, and things like that. kind of a different approach that the bridge crew is just there in this series.
Yeah.
But they're still developing them.
Right. They still have, they're still persons within the bounds of the show. Yeah. It's really interesting to see. So I mentioned Worf comes to the rescue, and that was a very funny scene. He shows up and he stabs the henchman in the back, and then, the henchman falls and there's Worf standing there, and, Troy and Riker come rushing out and give him a hug, and he's like, one's personal space is a right.
He does not like hugs.
No. And then he starts emoting at Deanna, and Riker's response is this a rescue or a continuation of the torture? I thought great line.
Well, I love it where she's like, oh, Worf, that's so, she says, that's so beautiful. And he says, inappropriate.
Yes. Well, because we remember Worf and Deanna had a relationship for a while on the Enterprise. So
yep.
I thought that was great. I'm really enjoying this Worf. The Worf of this season is I don't know,
stoic and in touch with his feelings, but he doesn't let him run him. And
he's changed. He's changed from TNG and DS9.
Yes,
but it's a good change. I like it.
Yeah.
So they bundle off to the shuttlecraft. It's probably it's a shuttlecraft. It's not the La Serena, but it's a shuttlecraft with a cloaking device.
I think they took the cloaking device. They don't say anything, although I thought there was like one hail on the comm system of the ship where they talk about the cloaking device being re-added, but I think they took the cloaking device from the Titan, put it on the shuttle, did their thing, came back, and then back on the Titan, if I remember correctly. So that's my assumption. That's headcanon. I don't think it actually says anything, but it would make sense.
It would make sense. Yeah. Because that would have been part of the plan, is send them off to go rescue Troy and Riker. At least Riker. I don't know if they knew Troy was there.
Do have to mention again, kind of briefly before we leave the Shrike, that they do find the body of Picard, who mentioned earlier. And they download the memory banks of the Shrike.
Right, which will be important as they try to figure out what's going on. So now, since by the end of the episode they destroy the Shrike, so that's all that is gone. So at this point, Picard finally realizes they need data, because we're told like the only way to reprogram the controls out of Vadic's hand is you need a positronic brain. We have one of those aboard. Luckily.
Oh no! Of course, they have to throw in the technobabble and asynchronous AI matrix. Okay, asynchronous means it can send and receive at the same time. Basically, it's a multiprocessor.
Right.
They need a AI multiprocessor that can do 90 trillion computations, which actually doesn't seem like a lot to me.
It doesn't.
Knowing what computers today can do millions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you would expect it to be a lot more by then. Yeah, a few hundred years in the future. So they, when they finally see Geordi, so Geordi and Picard and the others, and the passphrase to make sure that they're not changelings is another crack about Chateau Picard wine. Which is, I'm starting to make a checklist of everybody who makes a crack about Chateau Picard wine. We're really kind of, I think probably because we built it up in previous seasons, and now it's like, let's deflate Picard a little bit here with his wine.
I kind of get the feeling that Terry Matalas wants to retcon the first two seasons. Because there's the constant cracks about his wine. Yeah. And then there's the Riker Troy. We didn't mention it, but while they were reconciling, neither of them want to live in the primitive planet.
Right.
Neither of them want to stay there.
In that house with the judgy foyer.
And it's the house that was designed by retro prairie hipsters. I think he understood, Terry Matalas, this is just my opinion. Yeah. He understood that fans were not as pleased with the first two seasons as they should have been. Yeah. And so he decided he's going to correct a lot of that. And he's done it. Yep. But that part of that's going to be go back and kind of shuffle some of this stuff off.
Well, it's just like we haven't seen Lara at all. Like apart from that first episode, like she was shuffled off and goodbye, Lara.
That kind of disappointing. I liked her. I
like Lara. Yeah, I like the actress. I like the character. They're both interesting.
That being said, if if Riker and Troy want to move out of that house, I'll take it over.
Oh my gosh, that was a beautiful house.
Spot, beautiful log cabin. I'll take it.
It's got to be somewhere, Southern California, maybe. I don't know, or maybe it's up in Canada. I don't know where they're filming.
They're some of it's L.A. area, I know.
Yeah, I'm sure Memory Alpha can tell me where it is, so I can.
Toronto. Actually, I think a lot of the set parts are in Toronto.
Okay,
that's where they moved to now. Vancouver got too expensive.
Yeah, that's right. So then we have the battle of Data versus Lore. This internal battle, we get to see this Tron representation in their head, and this is where we get the title Surrender. And the very interesting idea is Data appears to be losing to Lore, right? Mm-hmm. And Data keeps pulling out his memories, and Lore is just so disdainful of Data's sappy memories, and he keeps giving them to Lore because he recognizes, he says, I've had everything and you've had nothing, and so I'm giving these to you. Well,
and that's what he says, but I think it's a little more interesting than that. He starts out he first pulls out the Sherlock Holmes hat.
Yep.
And it vanishes. He's confused. Data's like, what's going on? And it's like, I can't concentrate. And
right.
Of course, this is when Lore says, well, I'm conquering you, elementary Mr. I'm conquering you, Mr. Watson, or however you put it,
Yeah.
Where he does the Holmes with the pipe. But Data figures out very quickly that, because he's Data, that his memories are basically the sum of his parts.
Right. They represent him.
Yeah. His memories are who he is.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's kind of a theme we've heard before in Star Trek, not just in Picard, but in other Star Treks as well. But he's able to use his memories that he recognizes that Lore wants as trophies, that he won. Because Lore, it's the sum of my parts are the conquests I've had, the victories I've had, the fact that I've won. And Data recognizes, no, it's the memories. And so he keeps giving him the memories, and then finally gives him Spot.
Right. So he gives him the playing cards, which reminds him of all the card games, which was significant because the last episode of TNG, the last scene was them playing cards. So that was with Picard
finally joining. Yep.
Right. So that's significant. But Spot, and Spot's significance is a simple creature who taught Data how to love.
Yep.
So what does it mean to love? And so that really, love is the key to understanding who we are. And I kind of like that the show kind of delves into that. Now Data is a machine, so can the machine love? But regardless, it's making a point. The writers are making a point of the key that love is to understanding who we are in our inmost being. And they've stumbled onto something significant in that.
And it was interesting because, of course, they play this out where you see the dots on the map, which looks like his positronic brain, or the lights blinking on his positronic brain, and they turn red. Of course, red bad, red Lore.
Yes,
but
yes.
It actually this was how Data takes over, how the two partitions merge.
Right.
Because that was the whole goal. That was the whole goal, that this android was going to be the better Data, where Data was going to take over and take control, but have the experiences and the emotion of Lore and B4 and Lal and
Sung
himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is how it happened. Is it looked like Lore won, but Data come back and no, actually, I just made you into me.
Data, in fact, the Data we have now is not the Data of the past, but is a sort of a new creation. He's almost a new man, a resurrected man in a sense. I mean, if we in Christianity we talk about, when we die, we will be reborn again, and we will have a resurrected, glorified body, and we will be new, and all of the bad will be gone. And it's kind of that idea is that Data is reborn here as something new.
And they perfected.
Yes.
In this.
And this, in fact, is several. They say in several different ways, like, Data, you've died several times, and now you're back again, and definitively, in a sense. Again, perhaps another way of Terry Matalas undoing the previous seasons of Picard, by the way. Undoing Data's death.
Well, and again, they kind of explicitly state that as like, that version of me was world weary and ready to die. I am not,
Right.
I'm not. We've got to be clear about this. They finally, I could hear Jimmy right now. They finally called out the
contractions. Well, when you got the emotion ship, you could do contractions, which is kind of dumb because, like, what does emotions have to do with contractions?
Such a simple grammatical thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That had to be again, the writers saying, okay, that was stupid from day one.
Now, while all that's going on, Jack is trying to stall Vadic. He goes to the bridge and he's got this, what looks like a grenade. It looks like he acts like it's a grenade, and he's trying to gambling on Vadic wanting him alive by bringing a grenade with him to the bridge, because it would kill him. And then it turns out, no, it's part of the trick. It's going to be first they get everybody else off the bridge except for him, and Seven insists on staying behind because Seven. And and it turns out it's a force shield, so that once Data has control, this is great, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Greetings, USS Titan. This is your friendly positronic pissed-off security system back online. Unwanted guests and monologuing protoplasms. I am initiating an immediate shift change.
Yeah.
I love Data's sense of humor.
Yep, that was so good.
So, and then what he ends up doing is opening the emergency evacuation doors on the bridge, which are behind the view screen, apparently, and explosive decompression of Vadic and the henchmen into space, where, as you alluded to, she freezes solid because she's a changeling, and then smashes into tiny little Terminator-style bits against the Shrike's hull, and then we blast the Shrike with all our weapons, and it's into bits.
Yeah, I like the idea of having the escape hatch behind the view screen, because we know going back to TNG that Starfleet vessels have an emergency escape hatch on the bridge. You see was it Naked? I always forget which is which. Naked Now.
Naked Time. Naked Time is the TOS. Naked Now is the new one, I think.
Naked Now is the TNG one.
Yeah.
But that was part of the reason why the ship in that episode was abandoned, because the crew literally sucked themselves out into space through the escape hatch. So we know they have them. And what better place than this big giant screen that's sitting there? And it kind of calls out the fact that all the new ships, the new Trek ships, all have basically windows for their view screens now.
Right. So just open the window.
Yeah, exactly. Out through the window.
Yeah, out the window, you two pixies go. What's it? No, It's a Wonderful Life. Out you two pixies go, through the door or out the window. Yeah. Nick, don't you know me? I love that quote. So apparently Vadic's goons were solids, or at least some of them were, because as they were being killed by the crew, as they were retaking the ship, some of them were like being stabbed or what have you, and falling to the deck and not turning into goo. Well, we see it. We know that they can be killed, and that's because that's how Crusher and the nurse or the doctor, the Titan's doctor. I don't think we ever hear her name. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, but anyways, how they figure out that these are different changelings is because they remain solid until too much damage is done, and then they eventually revert. So these are all changelings. These are all changelings. These are the changelings that were in the lab with Vadic. Right. That's right. That's and that one changeling that looked like Sydney died and stayed solid until they started. Because that was the great scene of Sydney seeing it and just throwing up, not even responding. Yeah. But can you confirm this is not you? Still love that line. She confirms it's not her. Yeah. But Worf, when Worf stabs the one to rescue Riker and Troy, he then shoots it. He vaporizes it. And we see other times that they're vaporized. So now we don't always see them on screen do it, but these are all changelings. Yeah. Okay. So once they have the ship back under control, and we have this great reunion scene in the conference room, not ready room, but the conference room off the bridge, it kind of evokes our memories of all those TNG episodes. where they were
did
there.
You notice they all sat the same spots?
Yes.
More or less.
Kind of flipped, though. I think it was like Picard was...
Because the conference room is flipped.
Yes.
The windows...
Right.
So Riker and Troy always sat at Picard's right-hand side.
Yes.
And Data, Geordi, and Dr. Crusher always sat on his left-hand side. Well, now on his left-hand side is the windows. On the Enterprise D, the right-hand side was the window.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So
they all sat basically the same spots.
Yeah, they fell into the old habit. Yeah, it was really cool to see them all there, everyone in their seats. And, for the first time this season, they were all in the same room. And that was really cool.
And, of course, you had to have the reminiscing. And
Yes, and the gentle ribbing and all that sort of thing. Deanna then says there's an all-consuming darkness on this ship. And she identifies it with being connected to Jack. And that's why she wants to, get together with him and try to walk him through what's going on. And so they have this counseling session. And, she says there's an ancient and weak voice inside Jack, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So... and
now,
then
there's been theories of the Pa Wraith, and that could play into that. That doesn't mean it is, but it could play into that.
Yeah. Where would Picard have picked up a Pa Wraith, though? That's the thing.
Was there something about where he was on Bajor at one point? And not talking about the DS9 episode, the first DS9 episode. Wasn't there something
later where
where they referenced it in this? No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Herosian. Because I knew there was something that had come from another series that they had referenced. It was the Herosian, where he had run into a Herosian hunter.
Right, in the Alpha Quadrant. Right,
Quadrant. So I don't know. I mean, it's possible. It could be. This could end up being something that revealed that Jack and Beverly ended up on Bajor at one point.
Right, but then what would the Irumodic syndrome have to do with it? Yeah, I mean, it's just still not enough
we're going to talk.
It could be two different things.
We're we talking a lot about the speculation that's been going on with this series and how great it's been. So
yeah, the next episode's title is Vox, which is Latin for voice, and that must be connected to this ancient and weak voice inside of Jack. Yep. Kind of curious to that. So they kind of do a mental exercise. We see them sort of in Jack's mind. He's in the corridor with that red door, and she's trying to get him to go through the door, and he doesn't want to go through the door, which is a classic avoidance, mental anxiety issue where a therapist will help you try to get over. And so the episode ends with, we see red light coming through the door, the keyhole, and then they start to open the door. And of course, that's when the episode ends, because that's what they want to do. So what do you think? Any other thoughts on that, or any other notes on this episode?
Just, again, this was such a well done episode. So many different layers of things going on, and the closing up some of the plot lines. Again, the Shrike and Vatican crew are gone; they're done. I mean,
right?
And that, I love that look on Seven's face. Give them everything. It just yells fire.
That was good. That was
blow
good.
It up. Get rid of this thing. That's why I say she's gone. I mean, changelings can survive a lot, including being out in space. We know that.
Yeah,
but they can't survive getting literally incinerated.
Yeah, blasted into bits. Speaking of Seven, by the way, she does call Shaw, and he calls her Hanson, and she says, "My name is 7 of 9." So,
but
and then
he calls her Hanson.
Yeah,
calls her Hanson later, but
right at that point he calls her 7, but later on he calls her Hanson. But I think we're going to start to see a little bit of reconciliation between them, a little bit of thawing of the Cold War. In fact, we'll see.
But no, this was a very, very good episode. Oh, and then of course we did have, after they'd taken back over the ship, we had the classic TMP flyby with the theme playing.
Yes. Oh, that was good. That was getting the movie theme music, which was that was good. Oh, excellent. So we did have some feedback. So if we want to get to that now, First feedback comes from Eric via email. Said, love the podcast this week. Two things. One, when Jimmy said the new data golem, the body of Data, didn't need the emotion chip because he got it in ST Generations. That was the old Data.
Yes.
The one that died in Nemesis, not this new Data. This new Data body presumably didn't have the chip. And two, your current podcast inspired me to send a picture. Oh, I forgot to prepare that for the video feed. I upgraded the signage above my home bar in honor of Star Trek Picard. He put up a sign that says 10 forward LA above his home bar. So that was really nice. He said, keep up the great work. Well, thank you, Eric. I wish I'd remembered to prepare that image. I agree. That presumably was the old Data body that had the emotion chip and not the new Data body.
Well, and you could headcanon, this really is kind of headcanon of that the emotion chip was built into the new body.
Yep.
But Data didn't know how to control it yet. He didn't have the right drivers. Only Lore had the right drivers for the new chip.
Would you like to run an update?
Yeah.
we will shut down in 5 minutes. The Windows update, whether you're doing anything or not. And then our next feedback comes from Grant via email. And I'm going to summarize Grant's email because it has presumably been obviated by the events of the most recent episode, Surrender. And he says, Jimmy, Dom, and Father Cory, always fun hearing your thoughts on the latest Star Trek episodes. I think that the big bad of Picard's third season will be Shinzon in the Remans. And he talks about how there's been several references, like Vadic's knife and Data's reference to the Shinzon ship, the scimitar, etc., etc., and genetic modifications, and so on and so forth. I think, and that he presumed that Shinzon was using the changelings to finish what he started in Nemesis, to use Frontier Day to use Thalaron radiation to wipe out Earth. And but Grant sent an email after watching Surrender and says, well, I think that's all been thrown out the window by this. And he did end with, of course, this is my third theory. None have survived contact with the next episode, but it's keeping me on my toes, which.
Yeah. I will say they have done a great job of putting so much information out there that can lead to one possibility. And then they kind of switch it where you have to rethink what those clues were saying.
Yeah.
And whether it is in the closing credits, we've talked about that multiple times, whether it is events and things, things like the Shrike looking like, Shinzon's ship. Although I thought Shinzon was dead at the end of Nemesis.
Yeah. Well, I think he was. So it would have been maybe other Remans or another clone or whatever. Yeah.
But either way, I mean, it's but just all these little hints, and they kind of build on each other, and they lead you one way. It's like, oh, actually, we're doing this instead. And they've done a masterful job of that. Yeah, we've all thrown out theories too, and they none of them have withstood scrutiny, but in a good way. I mean, it's like, that's a good theory, but here's something better that could be coming out.
It's been not predictable this season. I mean, that's the great thing. That's not predictable. So and that brings me to our next email from Aaron M., who has another theory that we've been talking about, which is the Changeling Beverly. He says, I was skeptical of the Changeling Beverly theory until Dominion. I'm now convinced she is, because she comes to the decision to kill Vadic too easily and quickly in my mind. Her being a changeling explains the radical shifts in this episode. As I recall, it was Beverly who brings up the idea of hurting or killing Vadic, and Picard gets caught up in her desperation. I think Changeling Beverly is one of the original changelings who stayed with the Great Link and is undercover to stop the rebellious threat. And Aaron goes on a little bit about some of that, and also talks a little bit about the Borg idea of that there's something about the Borg implants in Picard. But I think with the death of Vadic and the other crew members of the Shrike, I wonder if we've now left behind the changeling rebel thing.
I mean, I don't know if I really ever said anything, but I don't know if I ever really bought into the idea of changeling Beverly. Because, I mean, that same thing that explains her change as being a changeling, her change of mind towards killing someone, can also be explained by this is a mother protecting her son.
Right.
And knowing that the only way she can really protect her son from Vadic and whoever's controlling Vadic is to get Vadic out of the picture permanently.
Yeah. Yeah. That could explain it. And I think someone pointed out on our Discord community that it would be very late in the game to bring up Changeling Beverly. We've got 2 episodes left. Now, this next episode would have to be it. If it wasn't it, you just can't bring her up in the last hour. But I think even then it might be a little too late.
Well, I think we are going to find out the truth about Jack next episode. I mean, that's very clear. That's the whole purpose. It's going to be the whole purpose of the next episode. Find out the truth about Jack and find out who is responsible for everything that's going on.
Right.
I do think it is. I mean, the changelings are the very likely for the ones controlling Starfleet and everything. I mean, that's clearly they're the ones that are the breakaway changelings are the ones who are doing all that. I don't think there's going to be anybody behind them, but
yeah. And well, there's someone who's controlling the breakaway changelings, though. I think.
But it's possible that's possible it's one of the changelings, and it could be one of the changelings from DS9.
You mean the face that Vada kept seeing?
I think that's possible. That could be a changeling still.
Yeah,
now,
but then what does it have to do with?
There's
Jack,
someone who's not a changeling.
Yeah,
who's doing it, and because I mean, there's one possibility is that just Jack happened to be in the way, so to speak, of the changeling's plot.
Somehow,
because of his abilities or whatever, can help them overcome the changeling's plot.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is all the speculation we have here.
We'll find out.
But that's what's been so great about this season is there's been lots of great hints and lots of great things of it's this, well maybe it's this, and of course Terry Matalas has made it clear he's pulling from the history of Star Trek. He's pulling from canon all this great stuff.
Yeah. It'll be curious to see. I think what we have to look at the last episode, the 10th episode, a big portion of that is going to be the wrap up. This is the end of Star Trek Picard, presumably the end of Picard on screen and whatever, no matter what, if they come up with a continuation show with some of the characters. I think Picard is done. And so we have to wrap that up. So the significant portion of that episode will be concerned with that. So I think this next episode, this penultimate episode, is going to substantially reveal almost everything.
Yeah. This is the big reveal episode, next episode, where a lot of these plot lines will be sealed up. We will get conclusions. What is controlling Jack? Or what does Jack have that he's able to control?
Right.
Who is running it? Is it just a group of the changelings and there's one of them that's kind of taken over as a leader? Or is there other leaders? How much of Starfleet has been compromised by the changeling?
And what are they planning to do on Frontier Day?
Because it still seems like what they're going to do is they're in positions where they'll be able to take the fleet and attack Earth because they're all going to Earth. We know that.
That's a very Prodigy thing too, though, isn't it? Like turning the Starfleet against itself. I wonder if they would do that. But I'm curious.
Yeah, it's and maybe not so much against itself, but against the head of Starfleet. The head of Federation. Take out the head of the Federation, which we do. We don't see that in Prodigy per se, but we do see the fleet turning against itself.
Yeah, I'm curious whether we'll see any more cameos. That's the other big thing. I'm kind of curious. Like, will we see Will Wheaton? Will we see Janeway? I mean that would be. She's mentioned so often. I wonder.
Yeah, they keep bringing her up, and I mean that makes sense. Of course, you've got 7 of 9 there. Janeway's gonna be, and Janeway has shown up in
Prodigy,
in Nemesis,
in Nemesis, right?
She was a general, or not general, excuse me, admiral.
Yeah,
as in those movies. So, there's a lot there. I mean, there's rumors swirling about the future for this, and we can get into that if you have more feedback or.
No, that's the feedback. So we should talk about some of the rumors and other information that's out there. Now, again, this is all rumors, but
this is all rumors, and it is coming from YouTube sources and other sources, including Terry Matalas himself to some extent. I mean, he's kind of
Yeah.
stirring up. I think he wants to do more.
Yes.
Because I think he enjoyed this, which makes sense. But he's been on a lot of Popcast and a couple other YouTubers.
He's welcome to join us at any point, by the way.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We would have him in a heartbeat. It wouldn't even have to be 300th episode or something like that.
Show up any day.
Yeah, but there have been rumors that Paramount is noticing the reaction. And I was thinking about this actually as we've been recording. We talked about before, maybe not so much on podcast, but definitely in other conversations between Dom, Jimmy, and I, that we don't get a lot of response when we do the live episodes. When we do like Discovery, a lot of people don't respond as well to that.
When you say when we do the live episodes, like when we do when the shows are airing.
That's what I mean by the live episodes.
Yeah.
The episodes that,
as opposed to the older series that when we go over those. Yeah.
Sorry, that's kind of a shortcut I use, but yeah. When we talk about the current released episode, we really never got a lot of feedback. We would a little bit with Lower Decks and a little bit with Prodigy, kind of. We've gotten a lot with Picard season 3.
A lot more than usual. We have
gotten a lot. Actually, we've had some episodes we've had more feedback for Picard season 3 than we have any other episode.
Right.
So there's interest in Picard season 3, and Paramount seems to be noticing that. And so there are rumors that Alex Kurtzman's contract may not be renewed.
Right. So Alex Kurtzman is with his company's called Secret Hideout, and they were contracted by Paramount to make Star Trek, but they don't own Star Trek. Paramount does.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And just the rumors are Discovery season 5 will be his last Star Trek that he will be responsible for, or at least he will have to work with somebody like Terry Matalas.
Yeah. And because Terry Matalas may get the Kevin Feige job, like with the MCU and Disney, to running things.
Yeah, exactly. Where he's going to be the one that's going to be coordinating the new series, like say a Star Trek Legacy, which is starting to be big time rumors.
Well, I mean, the fans are all looking at the fact that we got Star Trek Strange New Worlds, basically. That's how, we demanded it because we liked Pike so much that Paramount said, give them what they want. And they gave it to us.
Great. And it turned out fantastic. I like Strange New World.
Oh, it's great. And that may be happening again with this idea of Star Trek Legacy.
Because there's now one of the commentators, Sidetrack, he keeps talking about a new series with Seven at the helm.
Yeah.
With the Titan.
Yeah.
I would like to see it, the current crew of the Titan.
Yeah.
With Shaw. Shaw.
I like Shaw. Yeah.
I could use words to describe him, but he's a good captain. He's just.
Yeah. I mean, he's the sand in the oyster that makes the pearl. I mean, he's that catalyst in there, and I like that between him and Seven. And I enjoy Shaw. I think he's another great character. He's not like Pike. He's different. No, and I think he's another great captain. I think he's fun.
I would love to see Star Trek Legacy, where it is the Titan. The Ventures of Titan after this. Kind of part of this rumors too is Patrick Stewart has said he's willing to reprise the character Picard after this, but only in cameos.
Yeah.
So he'd show up for like one scene or one episode or something like that.
Right.
And other TNG crews have said that as well.
I want more Worf, definitely. I would take more Worf and have him show up on a regular basis.
I know you guys have said Worf and Raffi show. It's like Worf, yes, Raffi.
I'm less enamored of Raffi than other people are.
Although her character has improved a lot in this season too.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, has improved a lot in this season.
Same with Seven. Yeah. They've all the Picard series characters. I kind of wish Cristobal Rios was still here to see what they could have done with him. Cause I think Terry Matalas would have had a blast with him.
Oh, I liked it. He was one of the breakout characters of previous seasons of Picard. I liked him a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But again, now this is all rumors. This is all speculation, but the fact that, and there's even, questions whether or not the Starfleet Academy series is actually going to happen, or if that was Kurtzman kind of throwing out a last ditch Hail Mary to try to get it done.
Right, because there was some talk about the weird timing of his announcement, and there were some issues with how it was announced and when it was announced, and the fact that there wasn't follow up, and some other things like that.
And the fact that there's still the Section 31 series that Paramount has says they are very interested in doing.
Yeah,
with Michelle Yeoh,
yeah,
who is an Oscar-winning major actress right now.
right. Yeah, and
so there's part of that kind of playing in there too, supposedly. Again, all this is rumors of people who are supposedly insiders and no insiders and know people who know people kind of things. So
I mean, Sidetrack Source is somebody who works in a third-party marketing company that's not inside Paramount or Secret Hideout or whatever. So you take that with a grain of salt. I mean, you got to take all this with a grain of salt.
And he claims he knows some of the people who are the representatives for the stars and stuff like that, so that there are a little more the agents, things like that. So
yeah, we'll see. All I know is we are, as Star Trek fans, we're in a wonderful period where we have multiple great series going on, and the hope of even more in the near future. I mean, we've got Strange New Worlds. We're finishing up the best series, the season of Picard. We got Lower Decks and Prodigy, and the hope of more. I mean, what more can you want?
And if Paramount is noticing that the fans are responding positively to Lower Decks and Prodigy and Strange New Worlds and this season of Picard, they're going to say, we want more like that.
Yeah.
And less like the USS Emotional Discovery.
Exactly. They never reveal streaming numbers, but I'm really curious to see. I would love to know what the numbers are like for Discovery versus other shows.
Well, and I wonder too, with TV nowadays, if it's as much about the numbers. Of course, they know. Paramount knows down to the byte how much, down to the bit how much data has gone from each of these, how many times these episodes have been watched. But if they're also looking at fan response, how podcasts like ours are responding to it, how people on Twitter and Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and all these other social media are responding to it, how people like the Critical Drinker, who was very critical of previous seasons Picard, has turned around.
Yeah.
What is it? Dave Cullen, same thing.
Yep.
These are YouTube commentators that were extremely negative on previous seasons of Picard and have absolutely just savaged Discovery.
Right.
And how they've turned around and they're like, this is fantastic. This is the Star Trek we wanted.
Exactly. All right. So it remains to be seen. We'll see what happens.
Yep. 2 more episodes.
All right. Well, we'll want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Jonathan L., Pam, Vincent D., Paul L., and Ryan O. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. That's it from us. We'd love to hear what you thought of Star Trek Picard's Surrender or any of the other things we talked about in this episode. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Star Trek in full video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there as well. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Star Trek Picard called Vox. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. Remember, it's the face of an old man who can still take a punch.